Well, I'd like to start by thanking the steering committee and Velma and Roxy for asking me to speak today, and to all of you who are here. When Velma called, actually I got a call from Nan, who's a Catholic Women's Conference, a member of their committee in San Antonio, and she said, Montana Catholic Women's Community would like for you to talk, and I was like, are you calling for me? Kids, be quiet. Like, so in the next 30 minutes, I am going to cover the topics of suffering, joy, and the meaning of life. Just kidding. It's a daunting task that I have pondered and prayed for more than a year now. Of course, there's no way that I could do that justice to any one of these topics, even in a year lecture series. But I hope to bite off a small and meaningful nugget for you to unwrap it. Am I not tall enough? That doesn't count for my time, right? Okay, better? Okay. So I hope to bite off a little nugget for you guys and maybe provide some new insights that would be helpful. Because there's so much packed in this talk, I'm going to work more from my paper than I usually do. So I've been a speaker for 10 years, but this talk is unique, and it is quite an honor to be invited here because this is the first talk that I've done since I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, or as I like to call it, the day that changed everything, challenged everything, and reframed everything, and called me into a completely new understanding of everything, defining everything that matters. All the comments in the intro were correct. These are things that I do, things that I've accomplished, and things that I used to believe were who I am. 2 years ago, I woke up on a Saturday morning just like any other, made my coffee, I should say that I think it's interesting, none of the speakers got to see each other's talks, and we're all introducing you to our families. So this is my group. There's me and my husband, and that's a picture of my office there. That's the healing space. I love that place. And my kiddos. So my vocation is as a wife and a mother and a therapist. I tell people I'm not a working mom. I am not a career woman, even though I work about 40 hours a week. I am a vocations woman, and this is the vocation God has called me to. So we go to the next slide there. So 2 years ago, it was a Saturday morning, and I woke up, drank my coffee, did my CrossFit workout, planned to do some more reading and researching. I made a written 5-year plan for completing my PhD. I was working for over a year or two to organize my house. I had a 52-week meal plan complete with grocery list, and I completed a rotating laminated bathing schedule for my children. I could go on, but you get the picture. So I was feeling on top of this mommy thing as a doctor's wife, and my husband is not just a doctor, he's an OB/GYN, so it's nice when he's around. Some of the girls ask me, how'd you find an NP OB/GYN to marry? I'm like, maybe you should consider a dermatologist. We had just recovered from welcoming our third child into our family after a very difficult, what I call spirit-challenging hyperemesis pregnancy, where I felt nauseous and was puking before I even got the 2 lines. Until the day I delivered. Through 14 home IVs, a mother's helper to make dinner and bathe my kids for 9 months, feeling like a total failure, I had come out the other side. I was rocking it. I was a warrior. So up before my family that Saturday, I was feeling great until I started feeling dizzy, oddly dizzy. Long story short, by 10 o'clock at night, I was in an emergency room, unable to walk, unable to see. I had difficulty talking, I had a paralyzed vocal cord. I was unable to eat without choking because your vocal cords protect your airway. Praying that whatever this thing was didn't put me on a ventilator, because as someone who's very interested in brain science, I was going through the parts of the brain. I was like, oh, vision, that's occipital, it's going down. So, stroke, no. MS, no. After all of the rule-outs, it was Guillain-Barré Miller-Fisher syndrome. Guillain-Barré is an autoimmune disorder that happens after you get a cold. And your body, instead of attacking the cold virus, gets confused and attacks your nervous system. 1 in 100,000 people get it. Out of the people who have Guillain-Barré, 1% of those have the variant that I had, so it's literally a 1 in a million disorder. I spent the next month in the hospital, first in the ICU with a PICC line, 5 plasma transplants, so thank you, blood and plasma donors. Pumped fat with IV steroids, unable to do anything, gained about 50 pounds in 4 weeks, so if you've heard my other talk, someone who has a history of an eating disorder and as a dancer and former model, traumatic. So I came home, I couldn't do anything, I came home with a walker. The only comfort that they could give me was it should go back to normal in time for most people. Lovely. Didn't they know I worked on timelines and spreadsheets? I need answers, people. But the brightest of the bright neurologists had welcomed me into the world of the unknown. We just don't know. And pushing them for answers was futile because it was obvious that doctors don't like not knowing. And at this point, I will reframe from a psychological analysis of personality types who choose medicine and their level of distress tolerance around ambiguity. So I started therapy, OT, PT, speech, mostly in a state of shock, trying to get that vocal cord online. I didn't know, you might not know, our vocal cords primarily are to protect our airway. They only secondarily make beautiful noise. So one day I sat down at my piano, I'm a piano player and a singer, while I was home alone and just wanted to sing and play, to do something else besides feeling really depressed. So in my home by myself, my left fingers wouldn't play, and I couldn't sing. So for me, that was rock bottom. And my recovery continues. I'm still in a journey to lose the steroid weight, still have lots of left side pain. That's why I'm wearing sandals. It's not because people from Texas don't own other shoes. It's because shoes hurt me. I don't wear a wedding ring because my whole left side hurts me. When nerves die, and when there's nerve death, the brain interprets it as pain. So truly a long process where nerves regrow. So we had a little bit of humor with this. For anyone who knows anything about me, you know that we have to start with humor. So, but the worst part really is the unforgivable, unrelenting pain that can make you feel like a bear. So I don't need to tell you that I was in a bad place. I had a friend who had a wife with terminal cancer, another friend who had a child with cancer, so horror still existed around me. Was I allowed to be upset about this? Alone in the feeling was the feeling I felt most of the time. You can only complain for so long before everyone around you is reminded of how much you hurt, how existentially confusing life had become, and if they are willing, most of the people had very helpful advice, like all the ones that you guys, suddenly little sayings like, offer it up, the Lord must really love you to make you a saint, or only God gives you things that can't handle, well-meaning, but made me want to puke. I don't even believe some of those things. You see, I'm a therapist. I see people suffer with unfair and unexplained things every day. I can honestly say that when I laid in my hospital bed, missing my kids' last days of school, my son's 5th birthday party, I never said, why me? Why not me? People suffer all the time. People get sick all the time. My question was, now what? And though I had a degree in psychology and Catholic studies, minors in theology and philosophy, and done papers on suffering and theology in the body, I was having trouble making the connections, making meaning and seeing purpose. My spiritual life was quiet for a very long time. Not empty, but quiet. It was the closest to contemplation that I'd ever been. I was communicating in a way, but without words. My act of faith was, I refuse to curse you, but I don't want to talk to you yet. So metaphorically, God and I were marinating. And this is very much how I approach my human relationships. Just ask my husband. Are you ready to talk yet? Nope, I don't trust myself to touch yet. So, metaphorically, God and I sat in a room with 2 chairs looking at each other in silence for over a year. That was really the best I could do. As an existentialist, I knew that there must be meaning here. God would make a way, but I couldn't see it yet. And my patience was often tried not by myself, as I had expected, but by those around me, inside and outside of my family, that wanted to learn what I'd learned about my experience. I didn't know. God and I were still working on it. It's hard to explain holy silence, unknowing, unclarity, that's a word, right? And is at the same time void, dark, cold, but not empty. It just is. It's like a womb experience. God had silenced me by paralyzing my vocal cord. He had stilled me by killing my nerves. He had humbled me by allowing steroid weight gain, bodily incompetence. Can't do that today, guys. Can't do that, kids. Can't be out in the sun. He had forced me to be. Now what? Slowly the phrases came to me. There will be meaning here, but meaning making is an acting process. When stuff hits the fan, you have to choose to clean it up and make it beautiful. You have to want to. Now what? Make it matter in some way? Open yourself to the process. Be patient for the lessons. Around this time, I was reintroduced to a writer that I was supposed to have read in college, Flannery O'Connor. In college, I simply thought she was strange and disturbed. I didn't get it. And even now, I'm far more interested with her biography and autobiographical writings. Flannery could say things that pierced deep into my soul and made me utter, yes, yes, that is it. I realized this because Flannery, by her own admission, was a Christian realist. Without even having heard that phrase before, when I read it, I said, me too! How could I not be? Not only do I have my own experience of profound suffering, but I am the steward of hundreds of people's suffering stories through my job every day. I am trained in trauma. That's what I do. I had inklings of this before, but it was all becoming more clear. It is the priest, the therapist, the spiritual director, and the trusted friend that gets tasked with the stories that people often only speak in a whisper. The stories that somehow don't seem to fit with a sanitized faith. When the struggle between I am Catholic, but this suffering has shaken everything I understand. If that is you, then I say to you, stay in the room with God. Stay on the chair. You don't have to say anything. Back to my question, with all this suffering in the world, worse than mine, am I allowed to be upset about this? Are you allowed to be upset? Yes, you are, and you need to be. Faith does not mean absence of emotion. Faith means feeling it all, being honest about it, and staying in the room. Faith means trusting that no matter how bad it gets, there's meaning and purpose. Faith is actively working towards meaning to be revealed, and sometimes that just means showing up to prayer time and not saying a word. This is the realism of the Catholic faith that so often nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to feel, nobody wants to see. The greatest lesson I have learned is that there is nothing so big that meaning cannot be named. The greatest gift that I've been given is the ability to sit with someone and hold emotional space. Often when people say those things that we hear, they are well-meaning, but it comes from their inability to sit with their own feelings when they hear about your feelings. So one of the greatest gifts I can offer my clients is being very okay with being uncomfortable. To not get scared off or uncomfortable by their story, just to hold that space. Story, in some ways, is all we have. And nota bene, I'm going to talk about this more in the next talk. It is how God enters your life and works out our salvation with our cooperation. Live your story, honor your story, your life, your home, your circumstances, and kids, and parents, and in-laws are all working material for your salvation. Get to know your story. Write about it. Story is inherently Catholic. And we are in Montana. I thought it was very interesting. We've been doing a little learning bit with my kiddos. I've been making them watch Lewis and Clark videos. So one of the things that I saw, you obviously know they're in Montana, is that Lewis and Clark kept journals, and that was their story. And one of the documentaries we watched said there would have been no true expedition to really speak of had it not been for these journals that were written down in stories. And then we think about our own faith, think about what the Bible is. Obviously that's one part of our faith with tradition and the magisterium, but it's a bedrock and it's full of stories. This is how we transmit faith and give glory to God. It is okay to be sad about your story, even if someone else's seems worse. And by being fully okay and present to your own, you are only making yourself more available to others. What connects us is not our strengths, but our hurts. I don't know anyone in this room personally, but I know that you have a story of suffering. What I would like to know is if you have a story of triumph. It is in and through our stories that God helps us understand who we are and who He is to us. So, when it comes to suffering and joy, we're not joyful because of suffering. If we read Salve Fici Dolores on the Christian meaning of human suffering by John Paul II, he says right in the first couple paragraphs that suffering is always an evil. And so we should seek to alleviate suffering. And the Catholic Church for all time has been one of the leaders in alleviating suffering through the world. So suffering is always an evil, but the suffering that we cannot alleviate through moral means can be redeemed. So we don't thank God and be joyful for the suffering. But the joy is, the essence of Christian joy is that there is meaning versus meaninglessness. That there is something rather than nothing. Christ is the source of our joy because Christ, by His death on a cross, has not that He has gotten rid of suffering, cleaned it up and made it look shiny. Christ in the resurrection still has the wounds, and that's an important thing to remember. But that He has gotten in the mud with us, brought us out. Joy is that even when you sit in your room of suffering, the chair next to you is not empty. So I do not bring a story of someone who has answers wrapped up in a bento box, as I would like to have. I bring to you the story of a pilgrim, a fellow journeyer, who has been through some of life's throes and undoubtedly will go through more. But when people ask me, how can you be a trauma therapist? how can you hear the things that you hear and be okay and still praise God? It's because it's not the first part of the sentence. God is the comma. God is the but. This is how I can still sing the praise of God through my story, through your story, through all the horrors of the world. My hope is that I may be worthy of my sufferings. And so the song that we sang at the beginning is called Doxology. When Steve and I got married, the first song that was sung right before the entrance was this beautiful a cappella of Doxology. Because we wanted to commit our life, our mission, our marriage, to being one of praising God. We wanted it to be the entrance song, the anthem of what we did. So how is it then, through all of these things and the many challenges, I'm talking about my challenges, but there's been many challenges on my family and on my husband as well, that we can still sing this praise to God. And it's because we are not alone. So I'm hoping that through this, it may offer some little nugget that can be helpful to you. Obviously, we can't solve all of that right now. I don't have all the answers, and that was part of sort of my anxiety coming to giving a talk about the suffering with my experience that was 3 years ago, is I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. I think that's the story, though, is that we don't have all the answers, and sometimes that's okay. We just have to sit and be with and know that they will come, and we have to be patient with ourselves and patient with those around us. So if you are in a moment of struggling, I hope this can be helpful to you. If a friend comes to you that's suffering, have a seat, offer them a cup of coffee or tea, and just sit with their story. And thank them for telling your story, and make space for their story, and cry with them. That is what we are called to do as Christians. And please don't apologize for your tears. I don't allow that in my office. I have a box that says tissues for your issues. But we do not apologize for our tears, right? Because they are real. This is the real stuff of life. And the iconography, the beautiful icons, the images of our faith are so beautiful. But sometimes they can make us think that our life is supposed to look like that. And often it doesn't. Like, Christianity is in the muck. God is in the muck with us. Those are about what he can make our muck if we allow him. So I would like to close with just a meditation for you guys. If you can just still your heart and maybe call to mind a suffering that you're having right now. It can be a physical pain, emotional pain, a spiritual pain. And I just want you to bring that to God. Bring that to Jesus and in his wounds. And I want you to imagine yourself sitting there. Because we are, in many ways, we are alone in our sufferings because we are the only one who can experience what we experience. But we're not alone because we're in relationship. And I want you to know that the fear of suffering is really from having to do it alone. But as then Cardinal Ratzinger said, he's prefect of the doctrine of the faith, he defined the human person as a network of relationships. We are born in a relationship. We hopefully live in relationships. And ultimately, we hope to die into relationship with his heaven, which is heaven. Hell is just the eternal lack of relationship. It's eternal aloneness. And so as we think of the thing that we're suffering, and that the devil is asking us and calling us and tempting us to be fearful because we're going to be alone in it, I just want you to imagine a chair next to you. and someone holding your hand. And that person holding your hand is Jesus. And unlike any other person in the world, Jesus knows your suffering because he's been there. And so with that, we will close by imagining these chairs, challenging us to stay seated, to not run from the suffering, which is often where addictions start. I tell my clients, your feelings will not kill you, but trying to avoid them might. Sitting in that space and praising God, not because we have suffered, but because we are not alone. Because there is something more. Because he is the comma to the rest of the story. And that we can invite him into that with us. And to help write the end of that story